Welcome to Health System CIO's Post-HIMSS interview with Mike Mistretta, SVP and CIO at VCH Health. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor-in-chief. Mike, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Anthony.
All right, very good, Mike. So we're a few days out from the show, the big HIMSS conference, annual conference. What were your impressions now? Uh, Context, 2019, everything was flowing and moving along.
Yeah,
2020 canceled. I hadn't gone back till this year, so I'd taken a few years off.
interesting.
Your impressions with your experience, I assume you'd been to many pre-COVID HIMSS shows.
Yeah,
What were your thoughts?
it's coming back. Last year went out, and last couple of years actually, it's been kind of dead. A lot of empty booth spaces, and a lot of on the vendor floor, and uh, some of the education sessions I thought were kind of dropped off quite a bit. So it's coming back. It's a different flavor, I think, now than what it had prior to COVID. We had talked, I think, last time a little bit about some of the differences between the two conferences a little bit, and I still think that holds true. But more of an international flavor right now, I think, is certainly much more permeating in this conference now than was there before. But yeah, it's starting to come back.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like a lot of activity. I heard some good things. I heard definitely some people were happy in a lot of ways. Did you? I guess that's what you're talking about. That sort of energy seemed to be back.
Yeah, quite a bit more back. Even the numbers, when you walked around the show floor, there was still empty booth space for sure. And I can remember in 2018, 2000, before COVID, that Florida Convention Center, it would take up the entire convention center. And this time it was pretty much the West Wing. It wasn't the entire thing. So nowhere near the size of what it used to be. I mean, which is a good thing, frankly, because I think before I was looking at whether or not I was even going to continue to go because just wasn't productive. It was more of a meat market. It was just getting out of control with the size of it. So I think it's back to a manageable size. It's back to where you can have productive conversations with some of the folks that are there.
Yeah, so I guess there's different levels that companies can participate at. They can be an exhibitor,
Yep.
or they can not exhibit but still attend and try and have a presence of people there and do meetings and things like that if they want to try and save some money. Um, I guess for someone in your position, one of the points of value would be, and we had talked about this previously, how you had
Yep.
mentioned that some of the certain level of people that you had enjoyed meeting with in the past that made it productive were not coming. So I guess that's something you keep an eye on as year passes on, years go on, is are the people that I want to meet with there, or are people saying, "Oh, we're not exhibiting," or "We're not attending," or that kind of thing? Because
Yep.
that's when the value diminishes for you. It kind of all works together.
That's correct. Yeah, you got
I was thinking about this. I was thinking there's like four reasons to go to a conference,
it.
um, and
Other than the bills.
I made a list. Okay, so there's education, which goes two ways.
Yep.
One would be education you're presenting, which you were, so you can be delivering education. You can be asked to speak. The other thing is attending sessions where you're receiving education. So giving or receiving education, vendor meetings and research, and then peer networking. Does that make sense? That sort of list of four things you might attend a
Does.
conference for?
Yeah, that's a good list for sure.
And did you have you had mentioned the fax thing that was something you'd went shopping for in years previously. Any specific agenda this year that you were able to achieve or not achieve in terms of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, no, so we were looking a couple of things. So I told you before, we used to be able to go out and meet with some of our vendor contacts and kind of discuss some things. So we were able to actually do that and accomplish that at this show this year. Example, we were getting ready to do a Fuji upgrade on our cardiology PACS system, able to meet with them and drill down on some things. So did have some folks there for that. Some other things, the big show theme this year, I think to me, there was two big things. AI and security were the two big things. Every vendor out there had an AI solution, so you have to get a little more granular, a little more specific. So we were looking at things that are probably going to be more along the lines of what I'll call a nuanced DAX Microsoft, depending what their name is today, competitor type thing. So we're getting ready to trial that. So I wanted to get something that might spice that up. And we were able to find a couple of options out there to do that. So, you know, there are still some good things out there like that. Presentation on the education side, one of your topics, obviously, as you said, I was presenting there. That was good. There were some good sessions, kind of mixed things. I had three or four staff with me who went to some of those sessions, and some are better than others, just like you might expect out there. You know, some good learning points and some good stuff. The networking side of it, you know, I think that's where it's diminished a bit for me anyway. That's there. You know, they had the whole executive track that they've tried to reestablish and set up since CHIME's pulled out. And but there isn't nearly, for me anyway, the amount of network type stuff there that there used to be in previous years, just because of that. At the end of the day.
Yeah, when I was looking at the speaker list, I mean, I assume you're probably gonna got a lot less CIOs. They're gonna be over at ViVE with Chime, but
Yep.
there were a lot of CMIOs
Yeah.
types. It seems like quite a clinical bent to it. But if you're looking for exactly the CIO group, I still so again, my thinking is, you know, you've got your universe of CIOs. And I was talking with different people asking them, what percentage of CIOs do you think are part of Chime? Right? And people say, I don't know, or they say, I don't know, maybe 70% of CIOs are in Chime. So that's something to figure out. If you're in Chime and you're a CIO, you're probably going to ViVE,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
And then the question is it possible you're going to both? I'd say that's probably unlikely. It's
Yeah,
quite
I think that's going
unlikely.
to get more and more challenging moving forward.
So HIMSS is going to have to pick it, and maybe they're going to fight for the CIOs, but it's going to be a tough fight if most of them are in Chime. And if they're not going to fight for the CIOs, they're going to have to stake their flag in different areas, which could be the CMIO space. I don't know if it's going to be cybersecurity. I don't know if you have a gut feeling, but
Yeah, I
any
think
thoughts
what
there?
they're trying to do, at least on the executive track forum, it seemed like it was more leadership vented across. It didn't matter as long as you had a healthcare affiliation and in a leadership job description. There are a lot more vendor CEOs, CIO, not CIOs, but vendor VPs and things like that, sales VPs, things that are going into those executive tracks now. So it's definitely, in my mind anyway, becoming a much more, even the executive side is more sales oriented than
Mm-hmm.
it was. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, in that track, I actually met two reasonable contacts that we're probably going to follow up with some product. But you know, it's not the same as, it's just not the same flavor.
You know, it's an interesting point you're making, and it's an interesting point for discussion is to what degree do you as a CIO want to be sequestered and separated? Um, right? Because I know, no, it's true because I noticed a lot of that at ViVE. The
Yeah,
Chime, the Chime folks were quite separated and sequestered.
yeah,
Um, and is that a thing that's always good? Um, you know, I know you assume anytime you're around non-hospital IT folks, those people are going to try and sell to you all the time. They're not going to be able to stop themselves, and that's going to make things unpleasant.
that's
So,
correct.
so historically, there's always been either separation or some kind of ratio where it can't get out of hand, right? Because you don't want to be in a room with 50 people trying to sell to you. So ratios, I don't know. What are your thoughts around that whole kind of dynamic?
I think there needs to be some, at least some amount of protected space for us to network, because you know part of what we do is peer-to-peer sharing quite a bit. It's just part of the role that's out there. You know, when we go out and look for things, one of the first things I do is I go out and I say, okay, who's got a system that does X, right? And then that's one of the ways you qualify your people. Are you happy with them, not happy with them, what's good, what's bad? You know, it's kind of like a neutral reference, if you will, when you go into it. So you need some space to be able to have those kinds of conversations. There's also some just very specific education sessions that need to be or should be for our CIOs that are out there in healthcare. You know, and you're not going to get that, I don't think, anymore at the HIMSS conference. So, you know, another place to have protected space at ViVE for that's there.
But you still see a relevance for HIMSS, even if, you
I
don't have that
do, but I don't know that
networking.
it's always, I don't know that it's gonna be as much for the CIO anymore.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, I just, when I came back, as a matter of fact, you picked up on it. I think exactly. When I was looking at the ambient technologies for AI, the first thing I did is I came back to my CMIO and I said, "Can you talk to these guys?" And his comment back to me was, "Well, if you're finding these kinds of people, maybe I should be going to this, and maybe I should be talking to them next year." I said, let's have that conversation."
Yeah. Yeah, that may be how things go. Um, so that's interesting. So, you look at something like this cost benefit, everything's got to be worth it. We can't just do things because we've always done them,
Yeah,
right? We can't just go to shows because we've always gone to shows.
yeah,
On the sponsor side, they can't keep exhibiting or spending money that they've always spent if it doesn't. We all have to do things that make sense. Every year, I assume you make that evaluation, and it sounds like a few things are turning around in your head about maybe I'm not the best person for this particular show. Maybe I'm going to send some of my other people
yeah,
based on what I've experienced. And then you even have to decide, even if I'm invited to speak, because maybe I'm invited to speak, but it's still the overall value. Maybe that pushes it over the edge to where now it's worth going. Now that
yeah,
you mean, but if I'm not asked to speak, to me that's a completely different value proposition, right? If
yeah.
you're not asked to speak, you're not doing a session, that's a much bigger hurdle to get
Yeah,
you to go, right?
agreed. I agree 100%. Yeah. The other one I think that's going to be an up and comer and going to compete with them is Becker's.
Uh huh.
You look at that Becker's conference, which is coming out, I think, in October. They're putting on a big push now, and they're combining it with finance. So it's for kind of a finance and IT flavor to it, and I think that's going to take another pull off of some of these other conferences.
That's a really interesting point. So it isn't just sort of these two, there's others.
That's right.
And then there's probably a whole lot of, I don't know if there's regional stuff you get invited to. There's the online stuff like me right here that asks for your time once in a while. Um, but there's a lot of things competing for your time. But not to age you, but you've been around for a little while, right? I mean, this isn't your first rodeo. Here's a question. No offense. Now listen, look at my hair. It's gone. Okay, so um, what would your advice be to, younger folks with less experience who are getting invited all over the place? And I would imagine this is something you learn as you go on in your career. Maybe early on in your career, you're tempted to say yes to everything and overextend yourself and go to too many things.
For
Maybe you
sure.
get right. So maybe that's the trend. You get selective as you get older. What would your advice be to folks about, it's interesting. Then you see some CIOs, they don't do anything. They don't do anything. Their heads down. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, or at least some seem to be much more selective than others. Some are like, I mean, I don't want to go anywhere. Anyway, your thoughts.
Yeah, I think you have to in today. I mean, I can remember in days when I would go and I'd hit 4 or 5 events a night, right? You just kind of do the Uber thing and move around. Those days are gone. You just don't have the time or the energy, right? And so I think in today's world, you have to figure out who your partners are going to be, and that's who you're going to focus your time and energy on when you go out there. So if there's a focus thing where you're looking for something, that's one thing. You go and meet with those types of vendors. This job is about relationships at the end of the day. That's really what it comes down to. So where do you want to invest those relationships, and where's going to bring you the most benefit out of that? Because when you hit a cyber attack or you get ransomware or you get whatever, who are you going to be able to count on is those people that you've got those relationships with that are out there. And then change just proved that, frankly, that we're there. There's a lot of people scrambling now for them to change their clearinghouses. And I can tell you, I've talked to a couple of CIOs who were calling around and they said, I don't have anywhere to go because everybody's full. They don't have the capacity to take my business. And, if you've got a relationship with somebody, they'll figure out how to get you in. And
Uh, yeah.
no, I just say that's really what it's going to come down to is you choose your targets wisely.
Choose your targets wisely so you can overdo it in terms of being on the circuit or being out and about, but you can also underdo it, I think is what you're saying,
Yeah.
is that you do yourself no favors if you sort of are holed up in your health system. And would it I don't know, this is what comes to mind for me. Can you text a key person in a key crisis? Because that's sort of the next level, right?
Yep.
It's like we can
Yep.
all send emails around, but who can you text? And God forbid, who can you pick up the phone and call and will actually pick up, right? You need those
Yeah.
relationships.
And if they can't do it, can they give you somebody who can at the end of the day? Because a
Right.
lot of the time, again, it's relationship back to relationship to get some of this stuff done.
I think that's about all I had for you today. Just want to talk over the shows a little bit, and I think it'll be really interesting to see how these two and Becker's goes going forward.
Yeah,
But competition is good, right? So it'll
absolutely.
get better.
Absolutely.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. It's always a pleasure.